his opponent, right? And I think some of that was just the tempo of this matchup. Terrapagos really wants to lock into that Terra Starstorm and just feel like it's getting good value. Maybe even not terastallizing itself until like you kind of have the game on lock. So making that easier is definitely something that would be beneficial to Alex. So I do think you got to be very deliberate about when you terastallize in this one. You don't have to be afraid of hitting the button. You just need to know that you're making your best choice when you do it.
For sure, and I want to just echo what you mentioned about team preview and how critical this is for this game. Alejandro's team is the kind of team that you think you know what it's going to do, but you don't really know what it's going to do. And yes, you do have the team sheet right in front of you, but even then, there are so many different ways he can approach this matchup that, like the key beats, like there's going to be a fake out probably, there's going to be a trick room probably, there's probably going to be some redirection, but what order do the pieces come in? How does it all play together? That makes it so difficult for Alex to honestly just guess that information right off the bat. I think Alex is forced to lead very defensively, and we mentioned this when we were talking through this matchup earlier. I almost want to see Terrapagos in the back for Alex, just given that it is that choice specs variant. It doesn't need time to ramp up on the field. It's almost safer if it's in the back. You can feel out your opponent, and then you can figure out, okay, when exactly do I switch it in?
Yeah, I think some of the trouble with that is I guess the offensive part of the lead is what's interesting to me, because you do want to be pressuring some damage early. Giving up a free trick run of his team could be really scary. And then I assume we're going to see one of Ogrepon or Farigiraf as lead. They both kind of have some great value here with some useful utility moves, and both of them immune to Smeargle's Spore.
Both of them immune to Spore, both of them going to be threatening big damage on that Calyrex Ice Rider, and only the Farigiraf making its presence known on the field next to the Terrapagos for Alex against, once again, that Smeargle and Calyrex Ice Rider lead from Alejandro.
This is kind of what I was expecting for game one. So Smeargle might not be hugely excited here, where I think maybe most other combinations of Pokemon, Smeargle would be a little bit better of a spot here. In this particular situation, it's really just follow me and decorate that are reasonable options, although both are good. You can try to Spore the Terrapagos, which does at least mostly slow it down. Kind of forces a switch in that spot, perhaps, but the trade-off of that is you're then ignoring the Farigiraf, who potentially is going to get a immediate foul play off. And but hey, we've seen Alejandro likes terastallizing early. Maybe just immediately do that to get rid of the foul play weakness.
For sure. I mean, if you're positive that your opponent is going to terastallize their Terrapagos, though, you might want to try and go for some redirection. But there is no terastallization. Spore connects with Terrapagos, putting it straight to sleep. But that does mean this Calyrex Ice Rider could be taking damage from the Farigiraf. It's actually Psychic Noise connecting with that Smeargle for a good amount of damage. Now this Calyrex Ice Rider, free to do what it wants, essentially unpunished, will go for the Glacial Lance, will break the Terra Shell ability on the Terrapagos, meaning future attacks will do more damage, and gets a nice amount on the Farigiraf. But the speed is still in Farigiraf's favor, so there is a threat of a foul play now in play.
Yeah, I think on this turn, you really have to follow me. You get pretty good value for not doing so on the previous turn, as long as we don't see a one-turn sleep here, which could potentially be somewhat disastrous. But otherwise, you're looking pretty good. If Terrapagos sleeps even for a single turn, then you kind of get to take advantage of the next turn. Smeargle would love to be knocked out here and allow a free switch, which would likely prevent Terrapagos from ever acting in this first game.
Well, it will remain asleep for this turn, and the foul play from Farigiraf will not pick up the KO on the Smeargle, as that is not a Pokemon known for its attacking power. Trick Room set up now, so Calyrex Ice Rider free to do what it does best.
Kind of a air quotes critical hit there, where pretty sad damage with foul play. But I mean, you love that if you're Alex, where you don't want to pick up that knockout anyway. Now, Smeargle in a position where I think if it's me, I probably do knock it out this time with Psychic Noise. Just hope for the wake up, because I think you could deal a whole bunch of damage if you do. And looks like at least Alejandro considering an option where he doesn't risk that happening, tries to get a little more offensive pressure, because I mean, Smeargle's not doing a whole lot here, and you gotta get these Trick Room turns as advantage as possible. And
that's the issue, I think, with having Smeargle as your lead, is that there's just so much passive presence that it has on the field. It really cannot go on the offense, and as a result, you're forced to switch around. Certainly, you have another Follow Me user with that Indeedee, and the Psychic Terrain will be nice to block any priority attacks if Alex has any in the back. For now, though, that Glacial Lance will connect with both of Alex's Pokemon and fall short of a KO on both those Pokemon. Here comes Foul Play into the Calyrex. It's super effective, but unable to pick up the knockout. Can Terrapagos do it? Terra Starstorm now into the opposing Indeedee and also falls short of a KO.
Oh, so that's really interesting. I think if that's in the Calyrex slot, maybe you get the knockout instead. Important chip damage to the Indeedee because it's now in KO range, but now you have to kind of stall up this Trick Room, and I think you maybe got into a position where if you can survive Trick Room, get Terrapagos back out, and then Terrastalize, you probably just win the game. So now the timer is up. Alejandro really needs to win the game before Trick Room expires.
For sure, and some good information for Alex that the Foul Play probably would be a better tool to use after the Calyrex has gotten a KO or two. We do get our first Terrastalization from Alex. I believe this is onto that Terrapagos. So now the Terra Starstorm attack will be dealing spread damage. Could potentially pick up a double KO this turn depending on how the attacks are targeted, but we'll have to get through the Calyrex Ice Rider first. And we saw Alejandro lock in Helping Hand plus Glacial Lance. I imagine this is a double KO.
Yeah, it's really scary. But if it's not a double KO, he probably wins the game right here. His opponent probably wins the game right here, but Terrapagos going down easy. Critically at the Frigoraph, that one definitely didn't matter, and that double knockout is huge.
Yeah, so Alejandro really playing his game throughout this game number one, able to utilize the Smeargle's presence on the field as enough of a threat to get the Trick Room on the field when it's needed and not earlier. And I feel like that's a big adaptation compared to what we saw from him earlier on in the day, where he was going for that turn one Terrastalization, where he was going aggressively for those Trick Room plays. And with Ogerpon, Hearthflame, and Urshifu now in the back for Alex, is like you just said, as long as Trick Room's allowed to stay up, I think that's going to be a pretty comfortable lead for Alejandro.
Sort of an interesting position in the sense that, like, well, you know, if somehow you can't attack at this Calyrex, you know, you're threatening a lot of damage, at least there's no more psychic terrain, but I just don't know how you do enough now. I'm not sure I'm seeing the vision in this one.
Yeah, I do also love how Alejandro, now that there's no threat of the Terra Starstorm on the field, immediately locks in the Terrastalization on this Calyrex Ice Rider. Just on the off chance the Ogerpon Hearthflame is able to connect an attack against it, now with its fairy typing, doesn't have to worry about any big fire type damage from Ivy Cudgel. Spiky Shield, though, will be used on that Ogerpon to avoid damage this turn, and Follow Me from Indeedee will allow this Calyrex Ice Rider to stay safe. Aqua Jet, the move of choice from Alex, will pick up the KO onto that Indeedee. We'll get a little bit of chip damage from the Rocky Helmet to break a potential Focus Sash, and now that Calyrex has 2 attack boosts from Chilling Neigh, this Glacial Lance is going to do a lot of damage. Is still technically resisted on this Urshifu, but certainly would threaten a knockout next turn if this turn doesn't take it outright.
Yeah, still a ton of damage there. At least you're getting that first knockout, and you know, again, this is not like the most offensively gifted team outside of the Calyrex, but really looking like a nice spot for Alejandro. Still some Trick Room to stall out here. You know, the Ogerpon has just used its Spiky Shield, so if it doesn't get a second one on this turn, very likely to see it getting picked up by the Calyrex as well, and then there's just such a huge numerical advantage.
Yeah, you have to start thinking about game 2 in this position as well, just given how far behind Alex is at this point. I'm curious if he's running through any potential adaptations. Doesn't seem like he has the right tools to stop Follow Me and a Trick Room at the end of the day.
Well, the Spiky Shield failing here, likely to see a double knockout, and Calyrex is going to get all 4, I think.
Well, it's gonna lose its partner Smeargle first, unfortunately, to that Aqua Jet, but I think you're absolutely right, Scott. Calyrex Ice Rider, Alejandro did the job he needed to do. He kept the Calyrex Ice Rider safe, and while it looks like there'll be one more turn here that Ogerpon able to hold on, I think that's some really good information, actually, for both these trainers moving forwards in this matchup. But you know, it's 1 versus 2, and we do get to see the reveal of Alejandro's final Pokemon in that Gallade. So Alex is leaving this matchup with as much information as he can get, but ultimately still no win condition in this position.
Yeah, I think a valuable non-scoop though there, because I agree, I was expecting a knockout, so learning a little bit, I think, about how this Ogerpon is trained, but all the same, both these Pokemon are going to be able to get an attack off. You only need the one, Ogerpon going down, and Alejandro wins game 1 here.
It makes me wonder how exactly Alex can adapt going into game number 2. I mean, knowing that Ogerpon can take those heavy hits from the Calyrex Ice Rider does open up a lot of opportunity, but you do still also want the Terrapagos to have Terastallization available to it. But if you were to decide, okay, fire type Ogerpon Hard Flame, you also get the +1 attack boost from Embody aspect. I mean, that seems like it would have been really beneficial to have. Maybe you can almost power through Alejandro's lead a little bit more aggressively with the Ogerpon and, I don't know, the Urshifu as well.
Yeah, I think like I was a little surprised to see the Spore on the first turn, because to me it seemed like a little bit greedy. I think the reason why it wasn't is kind of what we saw later there, where like I'm sure Alex also saw like, oh, you know, if I can switch Terrapagos out safely and just stall through Trick Room, I can win the game. The problem was that with the Pokemon he had in the back, he kind of couldn't do that.
Yeah.
The Ogerpon wound up being a little bulkier than I was expecting, and then maybe that would have allowed it potentially if that had switched into the Terrapagos slot. But I think that's just kind of the weakness of this team in general, where there is not a whole lot of defensive staying power, right? So
yeah.
I think you probably have to punish the Trick Room setup a little bit harder to have a realistic chance at this one.
For sure. I think what I want to do, now that I'm thinking about it, is see Alex lead the Pokemon he had in the back and have the Pokemon he had in the back in the lead. Because can you imagine if Farigiraf came out onto the field after all those attack boosts were up and that foul play connected with that Calyrex Ice Rider? I mean, even if Terastallization was on the board at that point, it had so many boosts. That was going to do so much damage, but it's still the Terrapagos out in front for Alex, but this time it's going to be the Ogerpon Hearthflame on the field next to it, with Smeargle and Calyrex Ice Rider out once again.
Okay, so I kind of like this adjustment. Like I mentioned before, I felt like you kind of have to lead at least one of the two Spore immune Pokemon here. Ogerpon perhaps a little bit better at that in the sense that you're really threatening a follow me away, threatening to follow me away the Spore. So, you know, there's still the option of trying to go for that Spore in the Terrapagos, but I think it's more obviously dangerous in this situation, so you're less likely to see it. Potentially could also follow me away a Decorate, which would be extremely funny, but, you know, a little bold move.
Yeah, a bold move. We'll have to see if it works out, and I think Alejandro is really questioning his approach in this game as well, because, you know, what we've seen and what the team implies is, you know, okay, this is a follow me Trick Room turn. We get the follow me here, so that's step 1 for Alejandro, moving closer and closer to the finals. Ivy Cudgel connects with that Smeargle, brings it down to its Focus Sash, and Terrapagos, we know it's going to attack, so it is going to get the KO there. It looks like it locked into Terra Starstorm, so Smeargle doing its job, taking one for the team and clearing the way for Calyrex Ice Rider to set up Trick Room once again.
I think this is sort of an interesting position if you assume that Alejandro has the same Pokemon as the previous game. You know, indeed, not nearly as powerful as it would otherwise be in this matchup, because you can just remove that Psychic Terrain. I think because of that, we see Gallade coming out here instead. Not quite the Trick Room Judo you're used to using, though. You know, we've seen previously how much Terrapagos enjoys playing against fighting-type Pokemon, and here is one once again here to ruin its day.
Yeah, it doesn't have close combat. Instead, Sacred Sword is going to be its move of choice, which does have a bit of a weaker base power, so that could work out to Alex's advantage. There's also still that Ogerpon next to the Terrapagos as well that could go for Follow Me. You know, obviously you'd love to land a Fire-type Ivy Cudgel against an Ice-type Calyrex Ice Rider, but given the fact that Trick Room has been up on the field, you really have to play carefully here.
I think a big one, too, is when you choose to Terrastallize the Terrapagos. Not seeing it yet, but would love to be able to stall out long enough to remove a Psychic Terrain.
For sure. There's the Glacial Lance, will break Terra Shell, will also connect with this Ogerpon Hearthflame. We saw how much damage it did with the boost, and without it, honestly, it still does a really good amount. Sacred Sword will pick up the KO on Ogerpon.
Pretty easy knockout there, but Terrapagos is going to do a pretty serious amount of damage in return. We'll have to see what it chooses to hit.
It chose the Gallade, which is able to hold on with its health in the red, but definitely within range of a Aqua Jet, so that's something that Alex could send out on the field if Urshifu was in the back of his party, but instead it's that Farigiraf coming out to play.
Farigiraf's a lot of fun here. Sort of interesting speed interaction where you're probably not totally sure which of the two of them is going to be slower. It's a big deal if it's Gallade, right? Where I think then there's a huge advantage for Alejandro, but if not, there's an interesting spot for Alex. Also in this situation now where, again, at some point you need to Terrastallize this Terrapagos. Now that it's not being protected by redirection, it'd be tempting to use it early, right? As much as you'd like to remove the Psychic Terrain, you also get drastically better stats and a more powerful attack when you do Terrastallize. So, you know, there's no point in waiting to remove that Psychic Terrain if you lose before it comes out in the field.
For sure, and I think the other key thing as well is just how much damage the Gallade could threaten down onto the Terrapagos, especially now that Terra Shell shell has been broken, and Alex is actually going to switch it out. So we will not get the reveal of that information just yet. And Alejandro taking this opportunity to terrastalize in front of a formal Terrapagos, very tight onto the Calyrex Ice Rider. That's a very interesting choice, a bit of a risk, but Alejandro certainly has the momentum on his side here. And goes for Imprison as well, so trying to stop Alex from reversing Trick Room. Sacred Sword into the Urshifu does a good amount of damage, but Foul Play into the Calyrex is now resisted and does nothing.
Yeah, that's, wow, you see a big, huge difference the amount of damage done there, but does at least get in a position where Gallight is in check. However, you know, this does allow for a pretty easy switch, so we'll have to see if there's really any meaningful reprisal.
Well, that's going to be even tougher now that Ndidi is on the field, bringing with it the Psychic Terrain, so no opportunity for Aqua Jet on that Urshifu, and unless it goes for a Detect this turn, it will just be knocked out by the Glacial Lance on this Calyrex Ice Rider. So it's really Farigiraf's game right now to win, and unfortunately, without the ability to re-twist the dimensions, without access to Protect on it, or the Terrapagos, Alejandro, as long as he has a couple more turns, is really in a comfortable spot to find his way into finals.
Yeah, so now I guess we see sort of a clear path where the Terrapagos is going to come back out in the field. You kind of have to terrastalize here and just hope that you can survive. It is much healthier than it was in the last game and will, again, have increased stats after it terrastalizes and changes its form. But, you know, the helping hand, Glacial is kind of the only realistic play on the other side. So it's just going to come down to how these Pokemon are trained. It's
going to come down to how these Pokemon are trained. We saw just how bulky the Ogerpon Hearthflame was on this team. Is the Terrapagos bulky as well? I mean, admittedly, with choice specs, you can afford to invest a little bit more in bulk. You know that you're going to have that special attack power already there, but a +1 Glacial Lance is quite a tall ask for this Pokemon to take. On top of that, we do get the Helping Hand boost as well. So here we go, here it comes. We know it's going to connect, we know it's going to do damage, and it's a double KO. Alejandro Terrazas taking this hard Trick Room team, Calyrex Ice Rider, all the way to the finals here in Vancouver.
Now, what a dominant set there. Just never really looked close, right? Where the Terrapagos is, you know, had so much potential power, but